You'd probably be aware of questions I've been asking to other witnesses about the grants that were refused by the Education Minister, as reported in February by Ben Packham in The Australian. I'm interested in understanding the process from the ARC point of view, how that came about. In particular, I note the public reporting has said that 18 proposals were referred to security agencies for assessment and that 5 came back recommending refusal. If that is correct, could you confirm that's correct? And if so, how did the ARC identify those 18 as, in your judgment, requiring consideration?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I will defer to my two colleagues for the detail. The ARC has an historical process for identifying potential sensitivities when it briefs the Minister on grant recommendations, and my two colleagues can add some more detail.
Thank you.
Okay. Cathy Dent, Acting Branch Manager at Australian Research Council. There's a range of sensitivities that we may be alerted to in the public domain through media articles. There are also instances where we've received information directly to the ARC. So if there's potential sensitivities, then we would outline those as a standard process.
So I might be able to add more to that, Chair. As part of the grant rounds that were undertaken last year, the department, as Ms Dent's been talking about, undertook the sensitivity checks and provided that in a briefing to the Minister, as well as the grant recommendations. As a result of identifying those sensitivities, the Minister requested further advice on those particular grants, and that was the 18 that were identified as having potential issues. That advice was sought from the Department of Home Affairs, who provided advice back, which was then provided to the Minister, and the Minister then proceeded to make a decision.
Okay, so in this specific instance, am I hearing right that it was media reporting that drew your attention to these 18 grants, or was it some other
media
source?
reporting and other reporting that we have, other information that we have available from past experiences and past information received by the agency. That was included in the the assessment, and the advice was received back from Home Affairs. The Home Affairs advice goes to the level of risk associated with grants, so it doesn't go to the question of refusal, but it just talks about the issues of risk and then what might be the appropriate mitigations in relation to those risks.
What specific media reporting in this instance did you rely on, or that brought this to your attention?
It could be a range of reporting that's happened over the years, Senator, so we keep that on hand. It could have been in media, and it just alerts us to a potential sensitivity.
Yes, and I'm asking,
we don't use that as a
I understand.
decision.
In this instance, I'm asking what was the specific media reporting that drew some or all of those cases to your attention?
I think I'd need to take that on notice. I don't have that with me at the moment, Senator.
Okay, all right, happy for you to take that on notice. Was this the first time that individual applications had been singled out, drawn out of the process for a referral?
I believe so.
Could you clarify what part do you mean by referral?
The 18 that were identified as requiring national security advice. Was this the first time that in the process this has been done? The previous year, were any identified for national security advice?
So, Senator, it's probably we go through an evolving process, and I think that's been a reflection on a lot of the evidence that's already been provided. So this was the first time that we had engaged with Home Affairs in relation to the grants that were being undertaken. So in that sense, I believe the answer is yes.
Okay, so just to be really clear, has either the ARC or, to your knowledge, the Education Minister in previous grant rounds referred potential grants to security agencies and asked them to make a national security assessment as to whether they should proceed or not?
I'm unaware whether the Minister has undertaken that actually.
Yeah, okay, and ARC?
Certainly we've been in conversations with security agencies for a number of years now, and the relationships have changed, and we have sought general advice from security agencies in the past. This was more specific than we have sought.
And what prompted that change? Why did you think that there would more specific advice was required this time around?
This was a request of the Minister. Right.
So it wasn't at the ARC's own initiative, it was at the Minister's initiative that they were referred?
In those cases, yes.
Yep. Okay. what was the process of identifying? How did you differentiate between the 18 you referred and the presumably hundreds that you didn't? What criteria did you use to decide that these 18 should be referred?
It was around potential sensitivities of individuals and organisations.
Okay. And so when you say potential individuals, you mean the grant applicants, the academics who applied?
So it's actually the universities that apply for funding under the funding with the ARC, of which they name their own researchers as well as collaborators, which are from partner organisations generally, which may be either in Australia or overseas.
Right. So, yes, I agree. Technically, it's the university that applies, but it's individual researchers who are going to undertake the work. So it was potentially the Australian academics identified and potentially other academics that were identified that were going to participate in this research?
That's correct.
And what about those academics made you think that it would be necessary to refer it?
As I indicated, it came up as a potential sensitivity as a result of information on our records.
What does the potential sensitivity mean?
That they've been identified as having an issue in the past, and that could be through reporting in the newspaper or through other means.
And what does an issue mean?
An issue means that there is they've been as a sensitivity. So it could be a range of things.
Okay. But sensitivity is an issue and an issue is a sensitivity. Mm-hmm. So I'm just finding it a little difficult to understand. What is it about these academics that caused a concern that prompted the referral?
So, Senator, as I was talking about before, the ARC scans media and looks for issues in relation to researchers, or they come to our attention. So that might be around who they've collaborated with, or whether they have links with overseas countries, which may not be beneficial to Australia.
Okay, so was it the participation of some academics reported publicly in the 1,000 Talents program or other talent recruitment programs that led you to believe that a referral was going to be necessary?
If that had been identified as an issue, yes, Senator.
What do you mean, if that had been identified as an issue?
Senator, it could have been part of the profile of issues that are out there in the public domain that would have come to our attention, and the idea is a no surprises briefing. But our interest in talent programs is as they relate to our grant conditions.
Okay, so to recap, this is the first time that the ARC and the Minister took this concrete action in this way. In other years there's been more informal processes. This is the first year that was specifically done.
Senator, sorry if I can correct
Please,
that.
I'm inviting to.
Information has been sought on batches of grants. This was a much more specific set of information sought about individual grants.
Right, okay. So this is the first time that it was sought in this specific way. It was sought in part in response to media reporting, and it was sought because of the participants in the research. It seems very clearly to me that the timeline is in August last year, Shari Markson reported in The Australian the name of 32 researchers who may be involved in 1,000 Talents program, and at the end of the year a decision was made for 5 of them to not proceed, 18 of them to be referred. That was the thing that changed, wasn't it, that report?
Not necessarily, Senator. So we have been working on this since July 2018 with the benefit of advice from National Security Agency.
Yes, but in July 2018 you didn't make this specific referral. Something changed last year that caused you to make this specific referral.
It was a change of process, Senator.
Yes,
so
until... And what I want to understand is why was that change in process?
Senator, the Australian article was one of a number of media reports that came out that made allegations about ARC-funded researchers. So the ground was changing dramatically from something we had been aware of to something that was becoming ever-present. And we certainly felt a compelling need to continue our conversations and be more specific in our actions.
Okay. Were any of the proposals which referred to security agencies people not named in the article by Ms Markson?
I think I'd need to take that on notice, Senator.
You can take that on notice. I would understand if you wouldn't have that on hand. I guess this gets around to the policy question here for the committee to consider, which is, if not for media reporting, we've just continued on the path that we're on. Would this specific referral not have occurred? And if that is the case, why wasn't the ARC being more proactive about these issues earlier?
So, Senator, maybe I can go back in history a bit to talk about what work the ARC has been doing. So, as I mentioned, we've been working since 2018 with the national security agencies. In the first instance, that work began with ASIO, where they were assisting us to develop our processes in relation to how we might be able to collect more information to identify whether there are issues in relation to researchers or their collaborators. That led to the ARC collecting a range of information in relation to researchers, and that started in, I think, 2019, bearing in mind the grant cycle that we go through, and also whether ASIO would be able to have systems in place to support us at that time as well. So from that period, the ARC then, we kind of got to a point where we needed probably more assistance than what ASIO was able to provide, and they helpfully put us in contact with the Department of Home Affairs. And so since probably May last year, we have been actively working with the Department of Home Affairs to increase our process, increase our level of the processes that we have in place. That included collecting a range more information in relation to researchers and their affiliations and interests for the grant cycle that opened in September last year.
Okay. I have to share the call with my colleagues, so just one final issue. Of the 5 institutions and the academics named in them who were refused grants on national security grounds, have any of those academics previously been received ARC grants?
I do believe so, Senator.
Yeah. What checks have taken place into the historical grants that they've received and whether the grant conditions were fulfilled?
Certainly, Senator, that's a work in progress at the moment, so we are currently going through that process of going through any issues that have been raised in relation to researchers, and that's part of our standard process, regardless of what the issue is. If an issue is raised around a researcher or the research that's being undertaken, the ARC investigates those, and that's what we're doing in these cases. And some cases have been closed and some are ongoing.
Right. So, of the cases that have been closed that you've concluded, were any issues of compliance with previous ARC grant conditions identified?
I don't believe so, Senator.
No. How many of them are ongoing?
In total, there are 5 cases ongoing.
Is that the 5 that were refused? Or 5?
It's just a coincidental number.
Coincidental, okay. Yep, that's good to know. When do you expect that process will be concluded with respect to these applicants who were refused this time?
I couldn't estimate, Senator, because it is ongoing work where we are working with the institutions in relation to the investigations that they're undertaking.
And what will the consequences be if you do identify that grant conditions have not been adhered to?
The option is for the ARC to terminate or for money to be repaid. It could be a range of actions. And
if that is the case, how will that be publicised?
It wouldn't be, Senator. The only publication would be on our grant search tool where the grant's closed, basically.
Right. So for the Parliament and the public, how can they have an assurance that if these problems are identified, that the action has been taken?
It's a good question, Senator. We work with institutions as the employers of researchers, and so they are the ones that we will have primary correspondence with and ongoing discussions with. So rather than spreading it more publicly around, as my colleague has said, there's a range of sanctions. We can prevent people from reapplying. We can and have requested money back on a range of grounds. This isn't the only domain in which we have allegations.
No, I appreciate that. Can I just invite you in closing then, before I off the call to others, to reflect that in this instance it is taxpayers' money, and I think there's a very strong public interest that if someone who's been refused a grant on national security grounds is subsequently discovered to have violated a previous ARC grant condition, but I think the public is entitled to know. And I just invite